I finally watched Reagan. When it comes to a movie about a controversial political figure, a figure that some people like, some people don't like, it's kind of hard to review the movie because everybody has their own opinions about Ronald Reagan going into it, but I want to try to be as fair as possible. This is one of those movies that has a gigantic gap in the audience score versus the critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. The Rotten Tomatoes score from critics is about 18% positive, an abysmally low rating. However, the audience score, the regular people that took the time to actually go online and make a review because they watched the movie and wanted to share their opinion, it's about 98% positive. Huge disparity. Having finally watched the movie for myself, I completely understand why that is, and it makes complete sense. It's very logical.
Isn't that logical?
If you're the type of guy or gal who likes Ronald Reagan and you want to see a positive movie about him, which is the target audience of the movie, you're going to like it and you're going to review it well. If you're an average moviegoer that doesn't really have a strong opinion of Reagan one way or the other, or if you actively dislike him, you're probably not going to like this movie so much. Even though it is overwhelmingly pro-Reagan and it portrays him in a very positive light, it doesn't sugarcoat a lot of the things about Ronald Reagan that aren't necessarily flattering. It shows him as an actor with his career as an actor not going terribly well. It shows him getting divorced. It shows him as president. There's the Iran-Contra scandal, which is portrayed. It's short, but it pays lip service to the fact that there was a bit of a scandal about how he handled the AIDS crisis during the 1980s. So it isn't 100% glowingly positive. They try to make him seem like a real person, flaws and all. But even so, the more you like Reagan and the more you remember this era, the more you're probably going to enjoy the film. As for the movie itself, it is very well acted. Dennis Quaid, he doesn't put on penguin makeup like from the Penguin TV show, but he looks enough like Reagan where you believe that it's him. You see Dennis Quaid when you watch the movie, but after a little while, you basically forget that it's Dennis Quaid and you just accept this person as Ronald Reagan. And it works surprisingly well. And that's the case for most of the people in the movie. The person who played Tip O'Neill, the person who played Margaret Thatcher, the person who played Gorbachev. While they don't necessarily look exactly like the people they're playing, you believe that it's them. You can suspend disbelief enough where you can just accept it and watch the movie for those events with those actors playing those characters, and they all do very well. The cinematography looks great. Most of the movie takes place in the 1980s when he was president, but it also shows him as a young man, a young boy, actually. It shows him as governor. It shows him as president of the Screen Actors Guild. You see a lot of different parts of Reagan throughout the course of his life. And those set pieces, the set designs, the cinematography, the feel of the movie, the tone of the movie for those periods is absolutely correct. The costumes, the music, the way people spoke to each other, it just feels like it really is from that era. So the movie did an excellent job of doing that. The movie suffers from too much stuff. They try to show too much of Reagan in too many different time periods with too many little tiny stories woven together, which takes away from the overall narrative. You see him born, you see him die, and you see everything in between. It's sort of a highlight reel. It's more like a highlight reel with actors versus an actual movie with a story that progresses. You see him in too many different eras, split up in a nonlinear fashion, which makes it a little bit harder to watch and a little bit less enjoyable than if it was a single narrative. If they would have picked a part of his life that was smaller, sort of like when Steven Spielberg made the movie about Lincoln. That was the last 4 months of Lincoln's life. Sure, they had some flashbacks and other things in that, but it was mostly that part of the story. If they would have done something similar with Reagan, where it was just him meeting with Gorbachev at the end of his presidency, him walking out at the meeting at Reykjavik, the tear down this wall moment. If they would have focused on that more, with maybe a little flashbacks here and there, it would have been a much better story as far as the flow of the telling of the story. This movie is dripping with nostalgia. So if you are old enough to remember Reagan as president, you'll probably enjoy the movie more. I remember Reagan as president, but I was very young. I remember him being president, but I learned about his presidency after he had already left office. But if you were there when he was shot, if you remember that, if you remember the events as they occurred, this movie is going to feel a lot more personal to you than if you're somebody younger. I'm sort of at that cutoff line. I'm in my mid-40s. Anybody older than me will probably remember these things pretty well. Anybody my age or younger, you're probably learning more about it from history rather than actually experiencing it. And that will really affect your enjoyment of the movie as well. As good as the set pieces are and as good as the acting is, the story structure is just not quite working. I love Jon Voight as an actor, and he's in this movie and he does a good job, but his character doesn't need to be in the movie. He plays an old Soviet spy in the modern era, which is one more time frame that doesn't need to be in the movie. The movie should all be in the past, having some present day reflections from an old Soviet spy. He's basically telling a younger Russian spy how the Soviet Union fell, as if a young Russian spy isn't going to already know everything about how Ronald Reagan interacted with the Soviet Union. It's part of history. Everybody knows it. It's not something a secret spy would have to explain to somebody. Everybody knows it already. Jon Voight is good, but it seems like he was in there because he's one of Hollywood's few outspoken conservatives, and they had to figure out a way to get him in there. But I think from a storytelling purpose, it may have been better if they told the Reagan story, maybe from the point of view of his speechwriters or somebody from his cabinet, or maybe a Secret Service agent after Reagan has retired. Something. I just don't think the Soviet spy thing quite worked. The dialogue in the movie is very well written. I wanted more. If the dialogue would have painted a picture of a story rather than these little snippets of his life, it would have worked so much better because the acting was great. It just needed a tighter story. My overall ranking of the movie, I'd say it's a 5 out of 10. However, if you're ranking just the acting, I'd say it's probably a 9 out of 10. As far as Dennis Quaid's performance as Ronald Reagan, even though he doesn't look or sound completely like him, he put in a tremendous performance. I give Dennis Quaid a 10 out of 10. I think 18% is too low on the critics' score. I do think it's a better movie than that. It's not as good as a lot of other biopics, but it is a solid flick. It is okay to watch. My criticisms of the movie aren't as harsh as maybe they came off as sounding. I enjoyed myself as I watched the movie. It was well done. It was fun to look at. It's a little bit too choppy. It's a little bit too disjointed. They try to do too much, which I commend them for. Just didn't quite gel the way that the director was hoping. But that's my honest opinion, and I thank you for stopping by the Reaction Lounge. I'm happy to share my opinions with you. Until next time, folks, thanks for stopping by.